Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to my 5th annual Worst Games of the Year list, where I'm going to look back at the games that I reviewed in 2021 and see which ones I enjoyed the least. Now, unlike most Worst Games of the Year lists, most of the games on this list weren't terrible. In fact, the first couple of games on this list I actually enjoyed and gave favorable words to in my reviews. However, looking at the best games that I reviewed, these were either underwhelming or flat out bad as we get lower in the list, or they had a specific audience that I just wasn't a part of, and I just got very minimal enjoyment compared to who the game's actual demographic was. So, some of these picks might be controversial, some of these might even be on your best games of the year list, but hey, you know what? On the internet, when you're a content creator, you have to be subject to people disagreeing with your opinions. So I hope that you all will see this as these are the games that I didn't particularly enjoy. And if you enjoy them, cool. And if not, cool. Let's have a discussion down in the comments, because not enough people do that on my list videos. And no, Nintendo, we're not going to let you forget that you killed Super Mario Bros. 35. So until the next time, enjoy the ratings. At number 10, we have Sonic Colors Ultimate, which I actually really enjoyed because I didn't play much of the Wii version because I didn't really like the controls at the time, and I also wasn't the biggest fan of 3D Sonics. But since playing Sonic Generations and Sonic Forces, I've come to have a slightly deeper appreciation of that genre. However, I had to put this on the worst games of the year list because of how poorly optimized it was. You'd think it would be so easy just to port over a Wii game that didn't really have extensive motion controls. But no, they couldn't even get that right. They had a whole bunch of glitches that most of them I didn't even realize were there. But other people have reported that there are moments where the game would send Sonic falling through the scenery or flying into the sky, certain sections would become unplayable, and at the very worst, some people would even cause the game to glitch out in multiple colors and cause potential seizure-inducing moments. So no matter how much I enjoyed the parts of the game that actually worked, I didn't want to condone rushed development or laziness for one reason or another, and I just don't think Sega deserves any passes. Even if the source material was good, I would honestly have to say at this point you're better off just playing the Wii version. Don't support developers that endorse things like rush or laziness or getting it done because we have to hurry up and have our Sonic title of the year. Just don't support them. At number 9, we have Tori 3D. This is actually a pretty good platformer for its price. It only costs $1, and the depth perception is really great. So why is it on the worst games list? Mainly because it's too short and too ugly. Now I get that the low resolution graphics were deliberate, because it wanted to be more like the Genesis and Nintendo 64 games of old. But the short length is something that I think only a person who is maybe a newbie to platformers or who doesn't have a whole lot of money to spend on Nintendo stuff would want to get. It's enjoyable, yes, but only for about a half hour before you've already beaten it and you're like, that's it? Where's more? Now, in the same year, the developer managed to pour out Tori 2, which was actually better than this, but it was still really short. So I wish there was a way that maybe the games could be combined together, maybe with even more levels, that it actually felt like a cohesive, full-length adventure. But as it stands, it's just kind of underwhelming compared to the best games of the year list. Still, good value, but underwhelming nonetheless. At number 8, we have New Pokemon Snap, a game that I thought was okay, but I'm probably also not the target demographic. This was made mainly to appeal to people who had played old Pokemon Snap, as I guess the first one is now going to be called retroactively. And to those players, I could kind of see where they're coming from, because I did watch the Completionists episode on the original game, and I can totally see it that this is a massive improvement. The graphics are phenomenal, and in fact, a lot of times I was amazed that they were running on a Switch, and the Pokemon animations were very nice. They sure put the actual mainline Pokemon games to shame, and I also liked how the Pokemon would interact with each other, and as you gained levels within the levels, they really should have worded that differently, you could see the Pokemon doing different things and even have entirely new Pokemon wandering around. So why is it on the worst games list? No, it is not just because I'm not a Pokemon fan. It's because at the end of the day, all it really is a photography simulator. Or to be more accurate, it's like the Picto Quest in Wind Waker, except that you can actually move around and take pictures. And you're on an auto track, so you don't have to worry about getting Link in the right position. And I get that that's fine for some people. And some of you might even argue, now wait a minute, Paul, you're the guy who loves visual novels. That may be so, but visual novels usually have a phenomenal story to tie it all together and make it worth it. And New Pokemon Snap didn't. It was a very boring and forgettable story. It did have voice acting in some parts of it, which is a huge step up considering that the mainline Pokemon games don't even have that. But if I'm only going to be taking pictures and not feel like I'm doing anything, and there's not a good story to wrap it all up, then I'm just going to say, it was okay while it lasted, but I think it's better off suited to those who have nostalgia for the old game than people like me who are just jumping in, hoping for a Pokemon game that's actually good, and realizing that it's more so actually decent. At number 7 is Pac-Man 99, another game that I had a decent amount of fun with, but it only lasted a little bit. Now, first and foremost, this game was very clearly damage control, or if it wasn't, it was just incredibly bad timing on Nintendo's part, because this was announced roughly 3 weeks after they discontinued Super Mario Bros. 35. And yes, I just recently found out that Nintendo made a tweet to their Japanese users showing how to delete games, and they used Super Mario Bros. 35 as an example. Way to rub it in, guys. But even looking past all of the messy logic that Nintendo had about getting rid of a cool game, this is basically just Pac-Man with multiple people. It only has one maze. The ghosts basically have the same AI. Pac-Man still auto-runs. You can't get him to stop, which would be so much easier than just running him into a wall. And even though it is cool to eat up the ghosts in trains like you could in Pac-Man Championship Edition, it's not as satisfying as that game because it's not as flashy. Now, Namco at one point did offer paid DLC in the form of reskins of the board using different characters and backgrounds from other Namco games, but you needed to pay for them, and they were still the same board. It didn't, add anything new to the base game. And then later, Namco was basically like, no, we decided that this stuff is actually going to be free. So, make up your minds, guys. Is this going to be a free game or not? So, you might get a little bit of enjoyment out of this. I mean, it is free, so it's not like it's going to hurt your wallet. But don't expect that enjoyment to last as long as, say, Tetris 99, because at the end of the day, we've played Pac-Man so much in the arcades, and Namco, I guess, really doesn't feel like making new maps, so you kind of get what you pay for, which in this case isn't much. At number 6, we have Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, which itself is weird by virtue of its existence, because it's based on an Olympics that was supposed to happen in 2020, because the game started development in 2021, but the 2020 Olympics were cancelled because of the pandemic, but then they had to wait until 2020-21 to release a 2019 game because of the 2020 pandemic. So, weird timing aside, this is basically a collection of Olympic-themed mini-games, but unlike the Mario and Sonic games, where they have a lot of other extra little tidbits, like Olympic trivia, dream events, a story mode, this is basically just mini-games, and that's all it is. Most of the mini-games range from decent to okay, and while it is cool that you have a very robust character editor and you can dress up as Sonic, you really need more substance to keep me interested. And besides how cool it was to see a very accurate portrayal of myself in the game, you're otherwise better off just getting a Mario and Sonic game. The one on the Switch actually does have a story mode where Bowser actually has a personality, so if you're missing that in the more recent Paper Mario games, you should check that out instead of this, because I basically only got this because of the Sonic costume, and I regret it. I guess my Sonic fanboy was showing, so don't make the same mistake as I did. Get an actual Mario and Sonic game if you want to show your support to Sonic in an Olympic setting. At number 5, we have WarioWare Get It Together. Now you might be saying, now wait a minute, Paul. You can't put this game on the list because you're not a true WarioWare fan. You can't appreciate this game's genius. Well, I am a big fan of WarioWare Gold, and that game was supposedly both a remake and also a new entry. So it had a ton of the games from the previous WarioWare entries, plus it had a new story mode and lots of museum things to do, and fully voiced cutscenes. Get It Together had basically none of that. It had a couple of mini games outside of the main game, but it hardly had any unlockables besides like cosmetics for your characters. And the cutscenes weren't fully voiced. They were mainly just snippets of like and wah in the cutscenes instead of having a full voiceover. WarioWare hardly had any lines at all, which is surprising because Charles Martinet voiced the commercial for the game. Why couldn't he have done it in the game itself? Not only that, but the main selling point was that the micro games were each controlled by the various WarioWare characters. But that meant that the microgames had to account for multiple different play styles, which meant that the microgames felt like they were toned down and held back by the limitations of the sheer number of characters, and most of them were unbalanced. So that meant that I overall felt like this was one of the weakest collections of microgames that I've seen. Now, the Nintendo-themed ones were alright, especially the Three Houses Tea Time scene, but I just feel like I would rather have a port of WarioWare Gold on the Switch as opposed to this brand new game, because it just feels like this game was so held back by I don't know what, but it just feels like they didn't do nearly as much work and bombastic thrills as they did in WarioWare Gold. So just get that game instead on the 3DS, or pray that it'll get ported. And if you like WarioWare Get It Together, that's totally fine. But in the future, I just hope that WarioWare games can at least be a little bit more balanced. Like maybe lower the character roster, make it one character. But please don't try to have a one-size-fits-all kind of mindset. At number 4, this is guaranteed to make a couple of people get angry, Super Mario 3D World. Now, I know what you're saying. Bowser's Fury is incredible. That is going to be on my best games of the year list. This is specifically talking about the half of the game that is the port of a 2013 Wii game. Now, I will admit that I would say that this is the definitive way to play Super Mario 3D World. The characters move much faster, there's online multiplayer, the stamps actually have a functional use, even if it's still not gameplay changing. It's at least something, because the Miiverse shut down. But that doesn't change the fact that I don't like Super Mario 3D World to begin with. The depth perception is terrible, the levels feel linear to a fault, and not in the good way like the Mario Galaxy games were, and a lot of the levels even seem to repeat themselves, and the timer didn't really help things. Like, even if you wanted to argue, but Paul, I think the level design is just as good between Super Mario Galaxy and this game. But Super Mario Galaxy didn't have the timer unless it was for a challenge mission. It let you take your time and do the level at your own pace, whereas this, it sort of feels like the game's saying, hurry up and beat it already so you can get to the next level. And that's just such an archaic design choice. And I also feel like the game just didn't do enough to try to justify me replaying it. Although, I did test out the multiplayer online, and it worked. Alright, there were a few lags here and there. It worked better than Super Mario Maker 2, but I still feel like online multiplayer also had its share of problems. But then again, those problems were probably in the original game. Overall, I tried really hard to give this game a second chance, but I just couldn't do it. If you like Mario 3D World, that's totally up to you to have your opinion, but I also think that most people that like 3D World also haven't played the Galaxy games, so at least play both of those, then tell me you can look in the mirror with a straight face and say, I enjoy 3D World. At number 3, we have 1943, The Battle for Midway. Technically, the full title of this game is Capcom Arcade Stadium 1943, The Battle for Midway, because Capcom Arcade Stadium is a collection of arcade games that Capcom released in the 80s. But only one of the games in that stadium is free to play. The rest of them you have to pay for. So I decided, well, I guess I'll give 1943 a shot since it's free. And it was a decent time for a couple of minutes, but that was about it. This is one of the earliest 2021 games, so it was easy for me to be impressed right off the bat. But if this were a standalone eShop release or a virtual console game, I would say, you're better off just getting something with a lot more staying power. At the end of the day, it's just a top-down shooter where you fight against hordes of enemies coming at you, kind of like you're playing Xevious, and you fight the same old bosses, and you have the same old music over and over again, and it's just a high score grabber at the end of the day. It doesn't feel like it has an established story mode, or anything to give it longevity besides just, oh, look, the enemies have tougher bullet patterns now, woo. And for being free, I guess you're getting your money's worth, but I definitely feel like if this were a standalone release, no one would really give a hoot about it, and neither do I. At number 2, we have World's End Club, which is by far the biggest disappointment of 2021, because I had hoped and prayed that this would be a masterpiece, because I am a huge fan of the Zero Escape and Danganronpa games, and I was hoping that the creators working together on this would be able to produce something grand along the lines of those masterpieces. Alas, the only thing they managed to do was create a phenomenal story and some great music numbers. Apart from that, World's End Club just doesn't feel good as a game. The flowchart aspect of it felt tacked on just because Zero Escape had it. The platforming is abysmal. It's as though these games took platformers before Super Mario Bros. And said, you know what? Super Mario Bros. Is irrelevant. That's just a silly little Nintendo game. Let's just ignore all of the progressions it made toward platforming and make our own game based off of the physics of Pac-Land. Or I don't know what they were thinking, but it felt like they weren't responsive, the level design was atrocious, and it didn't feel like it was a rewarding experience. It was almost as if the creators realized that their story couldn't be told with gameplay alone, and they had to have these platforming sections to justify why it's a game. Not only that, but the characters have different superpowers that they can use. But they often take so long to charge up that while you're waiting for the animation to go through, the enemies will often hit you, and the enemies kill you in one hit, which also doesn't help, and there's a very long, drawn-out game over with really annoying music that really makes you feel like you were an utter failure at gaming. I still stand by saying that the story is fantastic. It's a much more light-hearted affair than neither Zero Escape or Danganronpa put together. But it's not worth suffering through the terrible platforming to get to the good moments, unfortunately. I really hope the studio's next game can actually be a game instead of just a story that's cobbled together by poorly done gameplay sections. At number 1, we have Lost Lands Dark Overlord, free-to-play edition. After I played this game, I realized that I was going to really be picky about the kind of games I was going to play on the Switch from now on, so that hopefully I won't even make a top 10 worst games list next year. This had to be such a slap in the face to point-and-click adventure games, which I used to love. I was a huge fan of the Humongous Entertainment games as a kid. But Lost Lands features a really slow cursor that, I don't know, maybe it was a PC game first. Scratch that. It was an iPhone game first. But they didn't optimize it enough and barely even let you use the touchscreen. You couldn't play with the Pro Controller, so you were forced to use the Joy-Cons. The puzzles were abysmal, with most of them repeating the same concepts, and the main selling point, or should I say downloading point, because it's free, doesn't even work most of the time. So you're told that because this is a free-to-play edition, that you have a set number of hints, and after the hints run out, then you have to wait for them to recharge. And after that is done, then you have to buy more hints from the eShop. The problem is that even if you decide to play the game without paying any money, the hints don't always work. Like, they don't work at all during some of the mini-games, and sometimes they'll point to something that you already know. But then you can't take it back and say, that wasn't a good enough hint. Why couldn't they have done what the Professor Layton games did and offered you 4 different tiers of hints? So, if you're looking for a good point-and-click adventure game that has more personality and more character, try the Humongous Entertainment games. A couple of them are on Switch, and they're really good for young kids, but this is just a blatant waste of time. Well, with that, thank you very much for watching my list. I hope it wasn't too controversial. If it was, go ahead and argue with me in the comments. Tell me how much of a stupid jerkface I was for putting these games on there. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and let's hope 2022 has non-stop 100% good quality games, no duds whatsoever. Bye!